Yeah, born January 30th, 1942. Went to school when I was 4 years old. I remember going the first day to school, my cousin there, John O'Malley, took me there. And I got 2 pennies from the teacher. Seamus Gallagher was the teacher. Okay, spent from 4 years old until 14. That was my education. Went from the infants to the first and second grade, the third, the fourth, the fifth, and the sixth grade, and that was it. There was no tests at that time. There was no, you didn't graduate. That was it. You were gone. When you were 14, that was it. From then on, I spent 3 summers in Scotland, picking potatoes there. And at that time, my first week wages in Scotland, working 5.5 days a week, was £2.06. That was the English money. A pound of that went to the gaffer. The gaffer was from Deweyga, and he was married to a woman from Dewach, Mary Welch. So we had to pay Mary Welch £1. So that left us £1.03. So anyway, you go to the store at that time and buy yourself some soda or whatever the hell it was. So you saved about £1 each week. So that went on for the summer. It was April, May, June, July and August. And you started off, we say down in Stranraer. That was the first place. And I had an uncle there at that time in Paisley, Uncle Thomas was his name, my mother's brother. And he was known as a sailor. And I visited him once or twice there when I was in Scotland. And that's the first time I saw a TV. I was 15 years old, and I had never seen a TV in my life. So anyway, that was good. He was pretty good there. He worked in the mills in Scotland, and he used to send the thread and everything else to my mother back at home. He was, as I say, Thomas O'Malley, known as a sailor. Then I had another uncle that was also in Glasgow. Michael was his name. I didn't know too much about him. Then there was Uncle Anthony, who was in Cleveland. And at that time, I thought, well, maybe I should go to Cleveland, or I should go immigrate or something. I didn't want to come to America. I wanted to go to Australia. And at that time, working in England there, I remember going out there and paying 40 pounds there, fill out the application forms and this and that, and they would send you to Australia. They would give you a job, and that was it. You had an agreement there that you would pay them back in 3 years after that.
When was that? How old were you?
I was 17 at that time.
Where was that? In Coventry, right?
In Coventry, yeah. But anyway, that was it. So I had uncles there. I had Uncle Thomas there in Paisley in Scotland. Uncle Michael was also in Glasgow there. Uncle Anthony was in Cleveland. And then there was my grandfather. I don't remember too much about him. I think he died the year that I was born, 1942. His name was Pat O'Malley. And I realized later on, I was told later on, he took to the bed. And I'm saying, what is this, took to the bed? His son, John O'Malley, Corporal O'Malley, who was my uncle, my mother's brother, apparently he got this woman pregnant. And at that time, it was like a mortal sin. So he was so embarrassed that he didn't leave the house. As I say, he took to the bed. And that was it. So anyway, eventually, the Corporal John O'Malley, he married this woman anyway. O'Grady, her name was Ellen O'Grady. But anyway, but that was it. But I don't remember too much about him. But I do remember my grandmother. Now, at that time, she was what they called doting, they say in Ireland. Actually, it was Alzheimer's, And I remember her up in the room there, and we didn't want to let her out of the room because she would just ramble away and just go away, go on the road, and she wanted to go back to her parents' house. That apparently at that time, it's something with older people when they get to a certain point there, they revert back to their parents' house. Okay, so fine. All right, so then come out here, and one particular day then, your grandfather there, Johnny Patton, he got this call.
This is in Brooklyn, right?
In Brooklyn, yeah. He got this call, and it was from the restaurant out there. And it's still there, I guess it is, a Bridgeview restaurant. They said, there's a woman in here, and she's only dressed in night clothes, and she has a suitcase. Okay, it was a relation of his. She was from
Is
Ackle.
it the Bridgeview Diner?
Yeah. Okay, myself and your grandfather went out there, picked her up there, and took her and told her she was ready, had a suitcase, and just in, night clothes and things like that. So she lived on 92nd Street. We took her down there, and we said, okay, Annie Downey was her name. This is your house. No, she says, Johnny Patton, it's not my house. You don't put me in there. That is not my house. Now, in the meantime, as I say, she was all set to go back to Ackle, to where Cashel, where her parents were from. Okay, fine. So anyway, we finally convinced her anyway, and then the son came and took her over. So getting back to all of that now is, as you say, Kevin, there, old people, they revert back to, where they were born and things like that. But other than that, we were living, we were living off the land, actually. That was it. It was, potatoes. We sowed potatoes that lasted all year long. Mm-hmm. Vegetables, this, that, and everything else. Turf, yes, as I say, the fire never went out. We had no heat. We had no hot water. We had no running water. The water come from the river. And as I say, this and that. And then in the morning there, going to school there, it was porridge. Okay, fine. So you had your bowl of porridge there, and the next thing, the chimney had to be cleaned every year. Well, there'd be a lump of soot coming down into the pot. Ah, great. My mother would scoop it out and throw it in the garbage. That was it. You eat it, whether it was soot or not, but that was all you had. Going to school then, you had to have 2 sods of turf every day before you went to school. Taken to school. That was for the teacher, so he could have a fire. Now the fire was way up there, and we were way back here, so you could just see the fire. So, but other than that, that was life. You got home from school. You had to do, I was in charge of the cows, the cattle, and things like that. They were up in the field, tied up at that time, and you would let them loose and things like that, and watch them for a while, and somebody else had to go and get the water, and somebody else had to go and make sure there was turf for the rest of the day. So that was it. My father at that time was in England, working in England, and we didn't have much money there at that time. I remember at one time finding out where they had their money in this closet. Oh, this is many years later. Their total money, whatever they had, was £300. That was it. Nothing else. There was no bank account or nothing. £300. Okay, fine. So, other than that, then my father, he had a book. It wasn't a bank book. It was like a shopkeeper's book. And you would go to the shop there and you would order this stuff and that stuff, and they would write it down in the book. You had no cash at that time. So when my father would send a check from England, then you would go at the end of the month and pay it. Pay this. They were pretty good at that time. The pub there, they were very prosperous because they had the pub and they had a grocery shop next door. They also sold coffins, and there was a petrol pump there in Dubach.
Who was this? Yeah. Where was this?
In the pubs. The pubs, O'Malley's pub, yeah. So that was it. You would pay that. Then at Christmas time, you would get what they call a Christmas box. Because you had paid all your your bills and this and that, and you got a pound of tea and a pound of sugar or something else, some rashers or something like that. So that was it. So we lived pretty much mostly on the land. It was potatoes. Every goddamn day it was potatoes, a pot of potatoes. And at that time, we didn't have a stove. Everything was on the fire. It was, my mother would bake the cakes and, cook them on the fire and things like that. So anyway, after that then, that was it. I was in Scotland for 3 years at 17. Then I went to England when I was 70 years old. I wasn't supposed to be, a senior or whatever the hell. I was like a junior, so I wasn't entitled to a full man's wages in England. But anyway, stayed there in England for so many years, and as I said, then we come back out here. And in the meantime, then uncles here, there, this and that. I wrote to my uncle Anthony in Cleveland to sponsor me. He wouldn't sponsor me because he said the Vietnam was on. And if I was to come to Cleveland, then I would be drafted right away. So he didn't want the responsibility of me going, to the Vietnam War and getting killed. So that was it. So we were all spread all over the place. My grandmother, as I say, I don't remember my grandfather. I do remember my grandmother. And she was the one that my grandfather was supposedly rescued her when they were on a ship going into Westport. And everybody went on one side, and the ship, the hooker was a sailboat. It capsized. And apparently he was a swimmer, and he rescued her. So she was from Curran, and he was from Dua. So they finally got married. Okay, I don't remember him. I think he died when I was born in 1942. But anyway, then, as I say, they had 2 daughters and 5 sons. One of them lived there with us there, Mary Weir. She wasn't married at that time. But my mother and this and then the other ones, as I say, there was one in Cleveland. There was one in Chicago, there was one in Glasgow, and there was one in Paisley in Glasgow. Now I learned later on the one that was in not Detroit, where the hell was it?
Chicago.
Chicago, yeah. Apparently he had 2 sons, and somebody told me there later on they were Coast Guards to the Queen. They were, like policemen and things like that. But I never did know about them. But other than that, I know my Uncle Anthony in Cleveland. But that was it, After that, come out here when I was January the 9th, 1970. That was it. Met your mother back there in Ireland at that time. She was there on vacation. I got together and this and that. So finally, we eventually wound up here. So other than that, it's history from then on. So there you go.